Ever played Pangeon? Developed by veritable unknown Mr. Chiatsku Games and made available for your Windows-based PC by Polish publisher Ultimate Games SA in March of 2020, Pangeon is a brand new title and one that I know nothing about. Perusing the game's information page on Steam yields valuable insight into the world of Pangeon. From it, we learn that Pangeon is a single-player roguelike inspired by dungeon crawler classics. Fight your way through to the bottom of the so-called Pangeon. Eliminate the evil and save the world from a potential tragedy. The developer would go on in an interview to say that Pangeon is a combination of the best elements known from various games of the genre. A bold claim indeed. This sounds like fun stuff, and I do like the genre. A core component of roguelike games are their procedurally generated level designs. Procedural generation in games allows for unique gameplay in which the level's design, enemy locations, and loot drops are randomized to some extent. I can recall first learning of procedural generation when Blizzard's classic Diablo came out in 1997. Every time the player entered a dungeon, the layout would change with chests and monsters in different areas. This method of dungeon building adds an incredible amount of replay value to a game. In typical dungeon crawling fashion, the player must choose a classification for their character. We've got the warrior, archer, wizard, and thief. Typical stuff. The warrior has more health and strength, the archer and thief have more dexterity, and the wizard has a larger mana pool from which to draw. Although there are no bonuses aside from a few extra points in those categories. Each character can use any of the weapons, but the more points you have in the appropriate category, the more damage is done. The game tells you so right there. And the little question mark circles. See? But they don't give you the math or ever let you know how much damage you're doing. The weapons have damage stats, but I want to know how much more damage I'm doing with the bow than I am with the sword, or vice versa. You just never know. All you know is that more is good. For all I know, your character could never develop beyond the hit points. Enemies sometimes take a few hits and sometimes just take one. It's really luck of the draw. Upon entering the dungeon, the player finds themselves alone in a room. Attempting to exit brings up an information window telling the player that you need to get your EQ first. EQ? What? Oh, they mean equipment. Why are they abbreviating as though there isn't enough screen space to use full words? And isn't that an extra space between you and need? Nicely done. Scouting about reveals some starting equipment. You just can't see it. Presumably it's in this chest, but the chest never actually opens and you won't know what new items are in your inventory until you check. Oh wait, they tell you down here. See it? Pressing I opens your inventory. Equipping items is as easy as dragging and dropping. You can pick up stuff by pressing E. The left mouse button attacks and the right blocks. Hold the button for a strong attack and tap for a light one. You can also scroll the mouse wheel to switch between your primary and secondary weapons, after several tries. You can use the number keys for hotbar items, but that's about it. There are no other key bindings. There is only one dialog box that you can bring up, a combo inventory and stat screen. Too bad the stats don't update when you equip items. Oh well. There is no map. Forget about learning spells or special attacks. You can swing your weapon and shoot your bow or staff. The staff uses a ton of mana too, no thanks. One of the first things that a new adventurer in Pangeon will note is that the melee combat is just awful. The attack range of some of the enemies can be huge, conversely yours is small. Taking on most enemies with a melee weapon results in damage to both the enemy and the player. The bats are impossible to melee kill without taking damage. Oh my god. As such, this results in greater reliance on ranged weapons. I stuck it out with the bow, but running out of arrows is a great way to end up dead. Indeed, purchasing arrows from the merchant was probably my greatest financial expenditure, one coin at a time. Eventually, you'll find a trap door leading to the next level. Here the player is given an opportunity to stock up on items and sell unused equipment. You can talk to this guy and learn a little bit about whatever the story is, but this is the only person who says anything about it in the game. There are no other NPCs aside from the merchants. This is the one and only story element you get. There is no story, despite the claims of the developer. That's okay with me. In fact, I almost prefer it. But don't act like there's something bigger going on in this game world than there is. Buying armor seems to help, although I'm not sure exactly how much. Your armor rating is found just above your health and mana bar. Note the hotkey bar at the bottom of the screen. I, for whatever reason, never noticed its presence, so never used it. A bit more dungeon delving reveals the first boss, a large skeleton named the Reviver. I'm not sure what he revives because he just spawns bats and shoots projectiles. He certainly doesn't revive on death, I know that much. With the first boss defeated, the player is transported via teleport to the subsequent dungeon. This level tries to shake things up with a not-so-puzzling puzzle in the form of a button which must be pressed to open a door. This is one of 2 puzzles found in the world of Pangeon. The second involves finding 3 glowing artifacts so as to, once again, open a door. Mind-expanding stuff here. There are a number of enemies in Pangeon. Your character will bravely face off against goblins, skeletons, skeleton wizards, slimes, mud creatures, spiders, pumpkins for whatever reason, Fry Guy from Mario 2, and those god-awful bats. Ah, my jeez, stop! You can also purchase iron armor to replace the leather you'd been using. Of course, some of these items will randomly drop from enemies or burst forth from busted barrels. I guess that's what they mean by procedurally generated, the loot, not the level layout or enemies. And there really isn't much loot to get. There are the standard weapon tropes, including swords, bows, magic staffs, etc. But there is really only 1 or 2 of each, and switching weapons is a pain with the roller on the mouse. I don't know if it was just my mouse or what, but whenever I tried to switch from my bow to my sword, it either wouldn't work or it would take a few tries. And sometimes you need to switch weapons simply because you run out of arrows. You would think that the game would just switch to your secondary weapon if the primary runs out of ammo. Nope. To make matters worse, these few seconds can mean the difference between life and death. I sure wouldn't call the level designs interesting. It seems like the developers spent all their time on the first level and everything else wasn't really finished. I mean, the story is over after the first level. There are a few bosses who don't do much aside from moving about and sending projectiles your way. As long as you have a bunch of arrows and can circle strafe, things tend to work out. My experience was just 1 hit from a boss is enough to take you out. Ugh, frustrating. There are only 4 levels, half of what they claimed. I guess because they split the levels in half, they can get away with it. Nonsense. There are 4 levels in this game and 3 real bosses. The second and third bosses are the best, or at least they have the best design. The final level is tough if you run out of arrows. It's all because of these freaking bats, my god. You can either use arrows and kill them from a distance or just let them eat your face as you flail away with your melee attacks. I hate it. Oh, wait. Behind this corner is a merchant? I didn't know that. Well, that changes everything. Buying a ton of arrows kind of overpowers you, but that's okay, since this game delivers tons of cheap deaths as a result of poor controls. Although I do like when the baddies get stuck to the textures. Oh man, talk about a lack of play testing. Anyway, with all these arrows, these last baddies are a walk in the park. I guess this is the exit. They didn't even take the time to change the wall behind the door. Jeez Louise. If you're gonna be that lazy, at least use a different door. What's wrong with the very first door you see in the game? You boneheads could have used that one, come on. Here, I'll do it for you. There, done. Entering the door leading to the wall prompts a text screen informing the player that they have cleansed the dungeon of all evil things. Now it is safe and no longer a threat to the world. And then you're kicked to the main menu. And that's it. Unless you want to fight more bats and slimes in arena mode. But you don't get anything. It's not like you can retain your character's attribute points or gear you've collected. I'll pass. In fact, I'll pass on Pangeon completely. Well, I guess I've played through it entirely, so while I cannot truly pass on Pangeon, I certainly won't be having seconds. Now let's wrap this up with a few pros and cons. Alright, pros, there's gotta be a couple. Let's see. Maybe the visuals are kind of okay for what they are, especially on a couple of the bosses. Really, I think the chunky pixelated imagery is kind of just nostalgia-inducing. That's probably what it is. Other than that, it's a pretty bland game overall. The music is okay. Each level has its own music, and there is battle music, which I guess is something. Let's see, the length. It's short. 4 levels, 4 bosses. Although, what little time you spend here, you can spend elsewhere, which is probably a better use of your time. The game is only $10, which, now that I think about it, doesn't really seem worth it. This price will drop by 50% in less than a month, just watch. Now how about some cons? There are a few of these, let's see. The controls are pretty awful. Not only is your weapon reaction time really slow, but it's such a pain to change weapons. The worst part is that there are key bindings in the settings that do not exist. Look, the game is supposed to have a mini-map, but it doesn't. I can change it to M, like M for map, but pressing M does nothing. Absurd. The levels themselves are boring. They consist of walking through corridors and killing enemies. There is nothing that is procedurally generated as far as level layout or enemies go. And what about the story? Well, there is no story. I really don't care all that much, I just wish they wouldn't act like there was when really there isn't. It's not that the weapons and armor themselves are bad, it's just the way that their attributes are handled which I find unforgivable. Seriously, you will never know exactly how hard your character hits, nor will you ever know how much damage your armor absorbs. The whole thing at the beginning about more being better was completely laughable. The game is simply not very fun. There isn't enough here to keep the player's attention, and what little is here is uninspired. And how about the presentation? The game just doesn't feel done. It looks and plays like a game in early development from 1996. It has no polish, no panache, and nothing that separates it from the masses. And you know, I could possibly overlook how poorly made this game is if it wasn't for the outright lies made by the developer. They lied about the story. There isn't one. They lied about the number of levels, doubling it. And this game sure as hell doesn't combine the best elements from various games of the genre. Those claims are total malarkey, just like this game. Thank you for watching this. If you like watching silly stuff of this nature, please like this video and subscribe so as to be informed when new videos are posted.